I've told this story maybe 6 times now. Different people, different bars, different ends of this miserable, beautiful galaxy. And every time I get to the part where the sky cracked open, somebody stops me and says, "Come on, Halden. That didn't happen." And I get it. I do. If I hadn't been standing right there, breathing the same recycled air as the man, I wouldn't believe it either. But I was there. So let me tell it from the start. The real start. Not the part everyone's heard, the part with the warships and the Queen and all that. The real start is smaller than that. It's a man with a chipped enamel bowl and a half-frozen ration packet, crouched in a maintenance corridor at 3 in the morning, going PSS at something hiding behind a coolant pipe. That's where it begins. You ever heard of Cinder Run? Probably not. No reason you would. It's a refueling depot bolted onto the side of a dead moon out past the Veshran Drift, which is itself out past anywhere a person with options would choose to be. Officially, it's called Waystation 9 Ardent. Nobody calls it that. We called it Cinder Run because the whole moon underneath us was burned black, slag and old volcanic glass. No atmosphere worth the name. And the station lights at night turned the surface this dull red, like coals that had stopped caring about being fire. I worked the docks. Cargo flow, ballast trim, hull seal checks on the freighters that came through to top off their tanks before pushing on into the drift. It's not glamorous work. It's cold, it's loud, and the gravity plating in Section 7 had a stutter that put your stomach in your throat twice a shift. But it paid, and it was quiet in the ways that mattered, and a lot of us out there were the kind of people who needed somewhere quiet. Cinder Run was a mix. Humans, sure, maybe a third of the crew. But you had Threll dockhands with those long jointed arms that could reach into a cargo bay and pull a snagged pallet free without anybody crawling in after it. You had a quorum quartermaster named Issel who could do inventory math in her head faster than the station computer and never once let you forget it. You had a couple of those silent Brennock engineers who communicated mostly in pheromones and disappointed sighs. And you had Marek Vance. Marek was the man with the bowl. He was a hull tech like me, but on the opposite rotation, so mostly I knew him the way you know a man on the other shift. By the state he leaves the equipment in, by the notes he scratches into the maintenance log, by the half-finished cup of that awful synth coffee always sitting in the break room that you knew was his because nobody else took it that bitter. He was maybe 50, quiet, not unfriendly, just folded in the way men get when life's leaned on them a while. Word was he'd lost people back before Cinder Run, a family somewhere somehow. Nobody asked. That's the rule out there. You don't ask and people don't tell, and that mutual not knowing is the closest thing to kindness a place like that can offer. What I knew about Marek for sure was this. The man fed anything that couldn't feed itself. There was a colony of station rats, actual Earth rats, hitchhikers from some ancient supply run, generations deep, and Marek left scraps for them. There was a busted air recycler unit on level 4 that had grown a little mat of algae, and Marek rigged a light over it so the stupid thing wouldn't die. He kept a feeder going for the dock pigeons. Don't ask me how pigeons got to a dead moon 200 light years from anywhere. Nobody could answer that. But they were there, and Marek fed them, and that tells you most of what you need to know about the man. So when he found the thing behind the coolant pipe, of course he fed it. He told me about it himself later after everything. We were sitting in the wreck of the observation lounge, and I'll get to why it was a wreck, and he had this faraway look, and he just started talking. He said he heard it first. A sound. Not a rat sound, he knew rats. This was thinner. A kind of cheep that cracked at the end, like a sound made by something that had been making it for a long time and was getting tired. It was in the deep maintenance run under Section 9, the cold part of the station nobody went to unless a seal was failing. He'd gone down to check a pressure differential, and there in the dark, wedged behind a coolant line where the warmth leaked through, was a pair of eyes. Little eyes catching the light, low to the ground. He crouched, Made the noise people make at animals, hey, hey, easy, and the thing didn't bolt. Too weak to bolt, probably. He got his torch on it, and what he saw was, in his words, the ugliest, saddest, most pathetic-looking cat I ever met in my life. It was about the size of a house cat, maybe a little bigger. 4 legs, long body, a tail. But the skin wasn't fur, it was this dull, pebbled hide, gray going to black, dry and cracked from the cold. The head was wrong for a cat, too narrow, the jaw too long. And it had these little ridges down its spine, soft and folded like crumpled paper. But it had cat eyes. Big, frightened, hungry cat eyes. And Marek Vance never in his life walked past a hungry thing. He didn't have food on him. So he did the thing that, when I heard it, made my chest go tight. He took off his thermal undershirt, the one keeping him warm in a corridor that ran near vacuum cold, and he balled it up and pushed it gently toward the thing, and he went back up 2 levels to the break room and got the chipped bowl and a ration packet, and he came back down. That's a half-hour round trip, through the stutter gravity in Section 7, in the cold. For something he figured was a stray cat that crawled in off a supply ship. The thing was still there when he got back, sitting on his shirt, watching the corridor like it expected him not to come. He warmed the ration paste in his hands and put it in the bowl and slid it over. And he said the thing looked at the food, then looked at him, then looked at the food, and then it ate like it hadn't eaten in a week. Maybe it hadn't. He named it Soot. Because it was the color of the moon outside, and because everything on Cinder Run ended up the color of soot eventually, including the people. Now here's where I came into it. About a week after Marek found Soot, I started noticing things going missing from the galley. Not big things. Protein packets. A heat cell or 2. Somebody'd been raiding the stores on the night rotation, and since I ran day inventory with Issel, it landed on my desk. Issel was furious in that cold quorum way where they don't raise their voice, they just get very, very precise. 41 units, she said, tapping the manifest. 41 over 2 weeks. That is not error, Halden, that is hands. So I stayed late one night to catch the thief. And around 2 in the morning, I caught Marek Vance coming out of the galley with his pockets full. I'll be honest, my first feeling was disappointment. Because everybody liked Marek, even the people who didn't talk to him. And here he was, a thief. I said, Marek. He froze. Then he sighed this long, tired sigh, and he said, it's not what it looks like. And I said the thing everybody says. It never is. And he looked at me for a second, and then he said something I did not expect. He said, you want to meet her. I followed him down. Through Section 7, the gravity grabbing and letting go, down past the cold storage, into the deep maintenance run where the air had that metal taste and your breath fogged. And there in a little nest he'd built, his thermal shirt, a torn-up acoustic blanket, a heat cell glowing soft orange, was Soot. She wasn't pathetic anymore. The week of food had done its work. She'd filled out. The hide had a sheen to it now, that gray-black gone almost iridescent under the heat cell light like oil on water. She was bigger, too, noticeably bigger than a cat. And when she saw Marek, she made that cheap sound, but it didn't crack at the end this time. It ran up into a kind of trill, a happy sound, unmistakable in any language, and she trotted over and butted her narrow head against his shin. And I'm not too proud to admit it, I said, oh, just that, oh. Because she was, by then, the strangest and somehow most charming thing I'd ever seen. She had those soft ridges down her back, and when she was happy they fanned out a little, the way a cat's tail goes up. Her eyes were gold, real gold like coins with a black slot of a pupil, and she moved like a cat and a lizard and something else all at once, this fluid pour of motion. Marek crouched down and emptied his pockets, and she ate, neat and quick. And then she climbed into his lap and coiled there, and he put one big scarred hand on her back, and the man's whole face changed. The folded-in thing opened up. I know I shouldn't, he said, not looking at me. Stealing. I'll work it off. Garnish my pay, I don't care. But she eats a lot now, and the ration budget for one tech doesn't. He stopped. She needs it more than the manifest does. I stood there in the cold and I thought about Issel and the 41 units and the rules of the station. And then I looked at this gray-black knotcat purring in a sad man's lap on a dead moon at the edge of the dark. And I made a decision that I have never once regretted, no matter what it cost. I said, I'll cover the manifest. We'll bury it in spoilage. Issel won't look twice if the numbers come out clean. Marek looked up at me, and for a second I thought the man might cry. He didn't, but he nodded slow like a promise being made. And Soot opened one gold eye, looked right at me and trilled. I swear she knew, I swear it. For about a month that was our secret, mine and Marek's. We'd take turns slipping down to the deep run with food. We rigged a better heat cell. We patched the acoustic blanket. We watched Soot grow. And she did grow, faster than anything natural ought to. By the end of that month she was the size of a big dog, low and long, and her hide had hardened into proper scales, and those soft back ridges had firmed up into something with structure. And the food, God, the food. She went through 3 times what she had before. We were getting nervous about the manifest. Issel was getting suspicious again. But here's the thing, and this is the part I think about most, even now. She was good, she was gentle. She had this whole station of strangers around her, predators and prey and things that ate things on other worlds, and she never bit, never clawed, never so much as hissed at us. She'd learned our schedules. She'd wait by the corridor mouth when she knew we were coming. She'd bring us things, bits of slag. A dead station rat once laid neat at Marek's feet like an offering, and Marek thanked her seriously like she'd brought him a feast, and she fanned her ridges out proud. She liked me, but she loved Marek, the way she watched him, the way she folded herself around him when he sat. He'd talk to her low about nothing, about the shift, about the freighters, about the moon. And once, just once, I heard him talking to her about a boy, a son, past tense, soft. I left, some things you don't stay for. The trouble started with the scans. Cinder Run, like any depot, has a system that catalogs every life sign aboard. Crew, passengers in transit, the rats and pigeons even, all logged, because if a seal fails and you have to seal a section, you need to know what's breathing in there. It's a safety thing. Mostly it runs in the background and nobody looks at it. Until a galactic Concord patrol cutter docked for refueling and ran a routine sweep, the way they do, scanning every station they touch for contraband, for stowaways, for anything that pings their very long and very specific list of things the Concord cares about. And something on Cinder Run pinged. I found out because Issel found out. She came to me white, well, whatever passes for white on a quorum, this gray ashing out of her skin, and she put her tablet in front of me and said, "Halden, what is this?" It was a flagged life sign, down in the deep maintenance run, tagged with a Concord priority code I'd never seen, all reds and a single line of translated text. It said species protected under royal edict, unauthorized possession, capital offense, notify Dominion immediately. And under that, the species name, which the system had pulled from some deep Concord registry. Sharid Dominion, royal bloodline, and then a word that the translator gave us 3 ways because no single human word fit. It rendered it as Hatchling /heir/ last of line. I sat down very slowly. Issel was staring at me. "You knew," she said. "You and Vance, the manifest. I am not stupid, Halden, you knew." "We thought it was a cat," I said. My voice came out small. "It is not a cat." "No," I said, "I'm getting that. We should have moved her, hidden her, done something. But there wasn't time because here is the thing about Concord patrol cutters. When they flag a royalitic species, they don't write a report and file it. They send a burst transmission on a priority band that reaches the nearest sovereign authority in milliseconds. And the nearest sovereign authority was the Sharid Dominion. The cutter's captain, a Concord officer named Vel, came to find the station chief within the hour. I was in the office because Issel had dragged me there. The captain was one of those cold, polished, conquered types, and he laid it out flat. The Escharid, he explained, are a draconic species. Old, powerful, and this is the part that mattered recently, catastrophically grieving. Because 2 cycles back, a Escharid royal transport had been lost. Pirates or an accident, nobody knew. The transport had been carrying the Dominion's royal clutch, their next generation, and it had gone down somewhere in the Veshran Drift. Every hatchling aboard had been declared lost, mourned. The Dominion had gone into a period of grief so deep that they'd pulled back from half the galaxy, closed their borders, gone dark. The Escharid Queen, they called her the Mother of Ash. The translation said, though that lost something too, the Queen had lost her entire clutch. Every heir. The royal line ended. And now a conquered patrol cutter, refueling at a nothing depot at the edge of the drift, had pinged a living Escharid royal hatchling. In a maintenance corridor, eating stolen protein paced out of a chipped bowl. Captain Vell said, very carefully, "Do you understand what you are holding here?" And the station chief, a tired old human named Okonkwo, said, "I'm starting to." "The Dominion has been notified," Vell said. "They are coming. I would strongly advise that the hatchling be unharmed, well, and visible when they arrive." He paused. "And I would advise whoever has been responsible for it to think very carefully about how they wish to be remembered." Marek wouldn't leave her. That's the short version. They wanted to take Soot, secure her, they said, prep her for the handover, get her away from the unauthorized humans before the Dominion arrived. And Marek Vance, 50 years old, hull tech, feeder of pigeons, stood in the mouth of that maintenance corridor with a coolant wrench in his hand and said no. I was there for that too. I'd run down the second I heard. And I found Marek standing in front of the nest, and behind him Soot, big now, the size of a small horse, scales gone deep iridescent black-violet, those back ridges grown into the beginnings of something that looked horribly, beautifully like the start of wings, and she was pressed against his back, gold eyes wide, making a sound I'd never heard her make. A low keen. Frightened. Captain Vell had 2 security troopers with him. They had stunners, and Marek said, "You're not taking her like this, not scared, not dragged. She doesn't understand what's happening." "Sir," said Vell, "that animal is the heir to." "She's not an animal," Marek said, "and she's not a that. Her name's Soot, and she's been alone and cold and starving for 2 cycles in the dark, and the only people who came for her were us. So no, you don't get to drag her out of here like cargo. When her family comes, she'll go to them warm and fed and calm, and she'll go because I walk her out myself, not before." There was a long silence in that cold corridor. And then, and I'll never forget this, Soot moved out from behind him. She put herself half in front of Marek, between him and the stunners. This creature who had every reason to fear nothing on that station, who could probably have torn the troopers apart, put her body between the threat and the man who'd fed her. Captain Vell looked at that for a long moment. Then he holstered his sidearm and said, "The Dominion arrives in 19 hours. She is your responsibility until then. If anything happens to her, it will not be a conquered court you answer to. Do you understand?" Marek said, "I've kept her alive this long." And Vell, to his credit, almost smiled. "Yes," he said, "you have. That's the only reason I'm leaving you standing." 19 hours. I spent most of them with Marek and Soot in that corridor. We didn't talk much. There wasn't much to say. He fed her properly now. Issel had quietly opened the full stores to us, no more hiding, and she ate. And then she lay with her long head in his lap, and he stroked the scales between her eyes, and her ridges fanned slow and content. At one point he said, "She's leaving." I said, "Yeah." "That's good," he said. "That's a good thing. She's got a mother out there, a whole people. She'll be a queen someday." He swallowed. "That's so much more than I could ever." He stopped. I put my hand on his shoulder. He let me. "You saved her life," I said. "You know that, whatever happens. You found a starving thing in the dark, and you gave it your own shirt off your back. There's a whole royal bloodline that doesn't end because of you, Marek, because you fed a cat." He laughed wet. "Thought she was a cat," he said. "God help me, I thought she was a cat." Soot trilled in our sleep. And then the proximity klaxons went off, low and deep, the ones that only sound for capital-class arrivals, and the whole station shuddered, and a voice over the comm, Issel's tight, said, "Halden, Vance, you need to see this. You need to come up to the observation lounge. Now." We went up, and we looked out through the great curved window at the dead red moon, and the black sky beyond it. And the sky was no longer empty. I have seen big ships. You work the docks long enough, you stop being impressed by tonnage. Bulk freighters that block out a moon. Conquered dreadnoughts that take 20 minutes to fully clear a dock as they pass. I'd seen all of it. I thought I was a man who didn't gawp at ships anymore. I gawped, because what came out of the dark over Cinder Run that night was not a ship the way I understood ships. It was a fleet, and at the center of it was a thing so large my brain kept refusing to give it a size. It was black. Not painted black, black the way deep water is black, like it was drinking the moonlight instead of reflecting it. And it was shaped. Not the boxy functional shape of a conquered hull. It curved. It had ribs and spines and long sweeping lines that came to points, and the whole of it caught the dull red light off the dead moon below and threw it back as this deep, awful, beautiful violet. The exact color Soot's scales had become. They'd built their ships to look like themselves, or grown them, I never found out which. Around that central thing were the escorts, and escort makes them sound small, but each one was bigger than our whole station. Dozens of them. They came out of the dark in a slow, silent crescent, no engine flare, no running lights, just these vast black shapes appearing one after another like teeth in a closing jaw, until the whole sky over Cinder Run was escharred, and the stars were gone. Issel was at the window, very still. "The whole station's life support draw just dropped," she said quietly. "They're inside our shields. They walked through our shields like they weren't there." Nobody answered her. Behind me I heard Marek breathe out slow. And I heard, lower, the keen of Soot, who had followed us up, too big now to leave behind, too anxious to be apart from Marek, and who was pressed against the observation glass, gold eyes huge, staring out at the fleet of her own kind. And she made a sound I had never heard her make, not the cheep, not the trill, not the frightened keen. She called, a long, rising cry, vast out of all proportion to her body, a sound with harmonics in it that made the glass hum and the fillings in my teeth ache. A child's voice, throwing itself out into the dark, hoping. And the dark answered. Every escharred ship in that fleet lit at once, not with engines, but along their ribs and spines, lines of that deep violet light blazing up the length of them, all of them, the whole sky igniting in answer to one small cry from one lost child. The mother of Ash had heard her daughter. They came aboard through the main dock. Captain Vell had given orders, clear the dock, full deference, no weapons visible, every human off the deck except the ones the Dominion specifically required. And the Dominion had been specific. Through the conquered liaison, they'd sent exactly one instruction ahead of their boarding. "Bring us the human who kept her." Marek. I wasn't supposed to be there, but Marek looked at me, and I looked at him, and Issel said flatly, "I am also coming. Someone competent should witness this." And Captain Vell threw up his hands and said the Dominion could complain to him directly if it had a problem, and so the three of us walked Marek down to the dock to meet a queen. Soot walked with us. She wouldn't be parted from Marek, not now, not with her own people on the other side of that airlock. She paced beside him, that long fluid pour of motion, her shoulder against his hip, and every few steps she'd look up at him and he'd put his hand on her head and she'd settle. Then look up again. She was scared. After 2 cycles alone, after the cold and the dark, the thing that scared her most in the universe arriving was leaving the man who'd fed her. The dock doors opened. I want to describe her to you, the queen, and I know I'm going to fail because human words weren't built for it. But I'll try. She had to fold to come through the doors, and even folded she filled the dock. 40 feet of her, maybe more, it was hard to tell because she didn't hold still. She flowed, the way soot flowed, scaled up into something enormous and ancient. Her scales were black going to that violet, and over them, across her shoulders and down her spine, were markings in a pale ashen silver like cooled lava, like the moon outside. The Mother of Ash. I understood the name then. She looked like the moon had stood up and grown wings. And the wings. When she came fully through and unfolded, the wings opened halfway, brushing the dock ceiling 40 feet up, and they were the violet black of deep space with points of light scattered through the membrane, and I realized I was looking at stars. Bioluminescence, the Conquered told us later. To us it looked like she carried the night sky folded against her back. Her head was long and crowned with a sweep of horns, silver-ashed like her markings, and her eyes. Her eyes were gold, the same gold as Soot's. Coin gold, slot-pupilled, ancient and grieving, and in that first moment, blazing with a hope so raw it was hard to look at. Behind her came others, guards, courtiers, I don't know the right words. Smaller than her but still huge, deep-scaled, silent. But she didn't wait for them. She came through that door and her enormous head swept the dock once, fast, searching. And found Soot. And the Mother of Ash, Queen of the Escharid Dominion, sovereign of a fleet that had walked through our shields like they were smoke, made a sound that I felt in my sternum, low and broken and unmistakable in any language across any galaxy. A mother who had buried her children, seeing one alive. Soot froze. For one terrible second she didn't move. 2 cycles is a long time. She'd been a hatchling when she was lost, barely more than an egg thing, the Conquered said later, too young to hold a memory. She didn't know this giant. She knew Merk. She knew the chipped bowl and the heat cell and the thermal shirt. She knew the man's hand on her head. And the Queen saw it. The Queen, mid-stride toward her last living child, saw the hesitation, saw her own daughter shrink toward a human's leg, and she stopped. This enormous grieving creature who could have crossed that dock in one bound, who had every right in the universe to seize what was hers, stopped, and lowered her vast head down to the deck, and went still. And she waited. She let her daughter decide. I have thought about that moment more than almost any other in my life, because that's not what power does. Power takes. Power doesn't ask. And here was the most powerful thing I'd ever seen in a room, holding herself motionless on a filthy dock floor, because dragging a frightened child to her would have been a kind of violence, and she would not begin again with violence. Soot looked at the Queen, then up at Marek. And Marek Vance. I watched him do it. Marek crouched down beside her, this man who'd lost his own and never said a word about it. And he put both hands on her long head and turned her gently to face her mother. And he said, in that low voice he used for her, the voice for nothing and everything, "Go on, girl, that's yours, that's your mum." His voice cracked clean in half. "Go on, I've got you this far, go on." And he let go. Soot took one step toward the Queen, then another. Then she ran, that pour of motion breaking into a flat-out sprint across the dock, and the Mother of Ash rose up to meet her, and the two of them came together in a tangle of wings and necks and that low, broken sound. The Queen folding her starfield wings around her daughter, around the only piece of her future left in the whole universe, and Soot made the trilling sound, the happy one, the one she used to make when Merk came down the corridor with the bowl, and made it now into her mother's scales. The whole dock was silent. Even the Escharid guards had gone still. Issel had her hand over her mouth. Captain Vel was looking at the floor like a man at a funeral or a wedding, unsure which. And Marek Vance knelt alone on the cold deck where he'd let go of her, and watched his stray cat go home, and smiled, and let the tears run down his face without bothering to wipe them, because some things you don't wipe away. You just let them fall. I thought that was the end of it. I thought, she's home, the Queen will take her, the fleet will close the sky back up and leave, and we'll spend the rest of our lives telling people a story they won't believe. I thought Marek had done his great quiet thing and now he'd go back to feeding pigeons. I was wrong. Because after a long while, the queen and Soot wound together, the daughter showing the mother every inch of herself, the mother running her great head over her child like she was checking she was real. After all of that, the mother of Ash lifted her crowned head, and she turned those gold eyes on Marek. And the dock got very, very cold. Because here is the thing I haven't told you. Here is the part the Conquered explained to us afterward, the part that made Captain Vel go gray when he heard the full registry entry. Among the Escharad, an unbonded royal hatchling, a hatchling separated from the clutch, does not simply rejoin the line. It imprints. The Escharad bond, the bond between sovereign and successor, between mother and heir, is not a thing of blood. It's a thing of keeping, of who feeds you in the dark, of who you survive beside. The Escharad have a word for it that the translator rendered as first warmth, the first being who keeps you alive when you should have died. The being a hatchling bonds to his kin, irrevocably, for the whole of its long, long life. For 2 cycles, Soot had been alone, and then a human had found her starving in the cold and given her his own shirt and warmed her food in his hands and come back through the stutter gravity in the dark, again and again and again, asking nothing. Marek Vance was Soot's first warmth. By every law and tradition of the Escharad Dominion, older than the Conquered, older than human spaceflight, older than most of the stars we have names for, Marek Vance was kin to the royal heir. Bonded, recognized, family. And the mother of Ash knew it, had known it, I think, from the moment she watched her daughter shrink toward a human's leg. She'd seen, in that hesitation, exactly who had kept her child alive. She lowered her head to Marek, not the bow she'd given when she waited for Soot lower, all the way down until that enormous crowned head rested on the deck before a kneeling 50-year-old hull tech, until her gold eyes were level with his, close enough that her breath stirred his hair. And she spoke. She had a translator band, the Conquered had managed that much. And her voice came through it, and the band did its best, but you could hear the real voice underneath, vast and resonant, the sound of something that had been alive for 1,000 years. She said, "You found my hatchling in the dark." Marek didn't move. "Yes," he said, "ma'am." "You did not know what she was." "No, ma'am, I thought she was a cat." He let out a broken little laugh. "I thought she was a stray cat." The queen was quiet for a moment, and then the translator gave us a sound that it labeled, helplessly, as amusement/grief/wonder. "A stray," she said. "My daughter, the last of my line, the heir to the dominion of 40 worlds." A pause. "You fed her from a bowl." "It was all I had," Marek said. "I'm sorry if I'd known." "If you had known," the queen said, "what would you have done differently?" And Marek thought about it. Honestly thought about it in front of a dragon queen on a cold dock with a fleet hanging over a dead moon. And then he said the truest thing I think he's ever said. "Nothing," he said. "I'd have fed her just the same. She was hungry. That's all I needed to know." The mother of Ash held there, head on the deck, gold eyes on his. And then she did something the Escharad had not done. The Conquered told us later, in over 400 years. She gave him a name. Not a name like Marek. A Escharad name, a true one, the kind they give only to their own, and the translator band struggled with it, gave us 3 words and then a 4th, gave us Ashkeeper, gave us he who warmed the last coal, gave us kin by first warmth, and then gave up trying to choose and gave us all of them at once. And she said, "You are blood of the Dominion now, not by our choosing, by hers." She turned one eye toward Soot, who had pressed up beside her mother and was watching Marek with those gold coin eyes. "She chose you in the dark when she had nothing, and we do not unmake what a hatchling chooses. We have not the right." A pause. "Neither now do you. You are hers, she is yours. This is not a gift, Ashkeeper. It is simply what is true." Marek's hands were shaking. I don't understand what that means." "It means," said the queen, and the translator gave us gentleness, "a thing I would not have believed a dragon could hold, that you will never again be a man with no one. It means that for the rest of your days, however long or short your kind lives, you are watched over by a fleet that walks through shields. It means that when you are old and cold and at the end you will not be alone in the dark, because you did not leave her alone in the dark." Her eyes burned. "We Sharid remember our debts for 1,000 years, and we remember our kin forever." And Sut, the heir to 40 worlds, the last of an ancient royal line, broke away from her mother, crossed the dock, and pressed her great head against Merk's chest one more time, and trilled, the happy sound, the Bowley's coming sound, and Merk wrapped his arms as far around her as they'd go and held on, and the whole sky full of dragons led him. They didn't take Sut away that night. That's the part I think people get wrong when they hear the story. They imagine the fleet swallowing her up and gone, but the Sharid don't work like that. First warmth runs both ways. They couldn't take her from Merk any more than they could take Merk from her. It would have broken something in her that the Sharid believe doesn't heal. So they made an arrangement, of a kind that I don't think had ever been made before and may never be made again. Cinder Run, way station 9 Ardent, our nothing depot on a dead moon, became, overnight, the single most protected location in that arm of the galaxy. The Dominion stationed a permanent honor escort. Trade rerouted to us, because everyone wanted to dock where the dragons docked. Issel got the staffing and the budget she'd been screaming about for 6 years, and she has never once let any of us forget that it took a royal heir to get her a functional inventory system. And Sut stayed half the time. She grew, she's the size of a freighter now. Last I saw her, and still growing, and her wings carry stars in them just like her mother's. But she comes back to Cinder Run on a cycle of her own keeping, and when she comes, she goes straight to the deep maintenance run under Section 9, to the corridor where it started, where Merk long ago bolted down a proper heated platform and keeps, on a little shelf, a chipped enamel bowl that nobody is ever allowed to throw out. And the other half of the time Merk goes to her. They send a ship for him, a hull tech from a dead moon, ferried in state across 40 worlds, to sit in the high halls of the Sharid Dominion beside the throne, kin by first warmth, the strange, small, warm-blooded creature the dragons all know by name. Ashkeeper, he who warmed the last coal. He told me once in the wreck of the observation lounge, and I never did tell you why it was a wreck. Did I? It's because when the fleet first lit up in answer to Sut's cry, the harmonic blew out the big window, and the Dominion replaced the whole lounge with one carved from black Sharid hullstone, with stars in it. And it's the most beautiful room any human has ever stood in, and it sits bolted to the side of the ugliest moon in the galaxy. He told me once, sitting in that impossible room, that he still doesn't fully believe it. "I keep thinking I'll wake up," he said, "back on the old rotation, cold corridor, just me." "You won't," I said. "No," he agreed. He was quiet a while. Then he said, "You know the thing I can't get over, it's not the fleet, it's not the name, the throne, none of that." He turned his bowl bitter synth coffee in his hands. "It's that she came back for me, the queen. She didn't have to make any of this. She had her daughter back. She could have flown off and never thought about the human again. But she," his voice did the thing it did. "She made sure I'd never be alone again because I made sure her kid wasn't." He shook his head. Whole galaxy full of people who'd step over a starving thing in the dark. And the one time somebody didn't, it turned out to matter more than anything I ever did with my whole life. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. Outside the new black window, against the dead red moon, a shape the size of a freighter wheeled slow through the dark. Stars caught in her wings, gold eyes catching the moonlight's soot. Home for her cycle, keeping watch over the corridor where a sad man once fed her from a bowl. So that's the story. The real one. Not the warships and queens version everyone's heard, but the small one underneath it, the one that's actually true. A man found something starving in the cold, and he thought it was nothing, and he fed it anyway. That's it, that's the whole thing. He didn't do it for a reward. He didn't do it because he knew. He did it because it was hungry, and he was the kind of man who couldn't walk past a hungry thing, even when his own life had given him every reason to. And the universe, which is mostly cold and mostly dark and mostly does not care, the universe noticed. Just that once. It noticed, and it sent a fleet of dragons through our shields to say thank you, and it gave a lonely man a family that spans 40 worlds and remembers its kin forever. People ask me what the lesson is. I never know what to tell them. I'm a dockhand, I move cargo, I'm not a wise man. But if I had to say it, I'd say this. You never know what you're feeding in the dark. So feed it anyway.